ISIS is a community organizer for the ACLU of Arizona's Campaign for Smart Justice. She earned an associate degree in nonprofit business management from Glendale Community College and is currently working towards a bachelor's degree at Arizona State University in the same field. She is a proud native of Arizona and a first-generation Mexican-American. ISIS transitioned from the financial sector to nonprofit work after witnessing troubling inequities and feeling the desire to help identify and correct the injustices she saw around her. Her passion is what drove her to begin volunteer work with the ACLU of Arizona and later to join the Smart Justice staff. Please join me in welcoming Isis Gill.
Thank you all so much for that. Am I a little too loud, or am I okay? Thank you all so much for that, and thank you all for having me in the breakfast. I thought that it was going to be like bagels and things like that, but there was actually some meat and some substance to that, so I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. So I'm here, like everyone was introducing you all to talk about our campaign for smart justice, which is more or less a Goliath of a campaign. What we're trying to do with that is to reduce the prison and jail population by at least 50% while fighting racial disparities in our criminal justice system, and we'll go into a little bit more as I go throughout this presentation. But to loosen this up this morning, because it is a Sunday morning, let's be honest, I appreciate you all being out this early, but I'm getting used to it. So under that regard, I want to just use this little bit of an icebreaker here. Just to kind of keep us grounded in the conversations that we're going to be having, because I will make a disclaimer that unfortunately it is going to be some intense and difficult discussions that we'll be having for the next hour or so. So hopefully this will ground us in the right mindset. So the point of this here, let me give you an example, like who here is a fan of dogs? If you could raise your hand. Right. Who here is a fan of dogs? Yes, right? So essentially what we'll be doing is we'll raise our hands, and as I ask these series of questions, if you'll just look around to see how many arms are up as well, so that you can understand the community that we're in, that we've all been connected in other ways that we might not always want to admit to, right? So another example is who here's favorite color? Oh, I'm sorry. I will slow myself down. Thank you. Maybe I've had too much coffee this morning. Who here is favorite color? Favorite color, purple. All right, not bad. My favorite color, but I'm biased. Okay, so let's get into the realities of what we'll be talking about. Who here has ever had to worry about where they would get their next meal in their lifetime? Who here has ever had to deal with any type of mental illness? Who here has ever been a survivor of violence? Survivor of violence. Yes. Who here has ever had to deal with living paycheck to paycheck? And lastly, who here has ever had to deal with any drug or alcohol addiction issues? In yourselves, in your family, or anything of that sort, have you ever had? That's some difficult realities there. I bring those up in particular because we're seeing that unfortunately we're criminalizing a lot of the social issues that we deal with in Arizona and America as a whole. So I know that is difficult to imagine, but unfortunately that is the majority of the population that we're seeing in our prisons now. Low-level, non-violent drug offenses are making up the majority of people that we're incarcerating in this current era. So before I go deeper into the conversation that we'll be having, I want to go through our community agreements. Essentially what we do at the beginning of every presentation is to ensure that we're in a safe space and that we all understand that we're going to have some difficult and poignant points, but we obviously want to ensure that we're having this discussion. It's not going to be easy, but we need to have it in the most civil and kind way that we can, right? So if anybody can read this, if someone would be so kind to read the first bullet here for me.
Use people first language.
Meaning if anyone wants to address themselves as, hey, my name's Isis and I would like to be named addressed as Isis, I would appreciate it if someone makes that distinction, if we basically honor it and acknowledge that is what that first bullet there. Do you mind reading the second?
Step up, step back.
The point of step up, step back is essentially I would like everyone to be as engaged and involved in this presentation as possible. So essentially, please have the courage to step up and voice whatever opinions that you may have. There is no dumb or wrong question. We're here to learn from each other. And in that same token, if you feel like you're taking up a little too much air, please have the consciousness to step back a little bit and let others speak. Does someone mind reading the third bullet here?
Assume best intentions.
Thank you for that one. I hope that one's self-explanatory. Assume best intentions. The fourth here is phones on silent. We already went over that. We're all adults. If you need to take a phone call or what have you, please do so. It's just one of those things to hopefully keep us engaged, right? And lastly, we are a community of learning. It goes over to our further points of just that we would like to be involved as much with each other in this. So really quick, could we all agree that we can agree to follow these community norms? Is there anything else that I would need to add or anyone else that would like to add before we start?
Can I add to the use people first language?
Yes,
so
of course.
For example, the way I've heard it explained is you would say a person with autism rather than an autistic, or a person with depression as opposed to a depressive.
Thank you for that, Beth. Okay, and then let me go over our agenda so y'all can understand a little bit more of what the next hour will be. That'll be lovely. So I'll go over a little bit of who we are, meaning who I am and what really brought me into this work, as the short bio that Ron was reading told you a little bit about. Then we'll go into a little bit of a quick overview of what the ACLU is, because Anito, I don't know where he went, did a great synopsis of that. And then we'll go into basically the overview of the campaign for smart justice. And then within that, after that, we'll go into our Game of Life, Criminal Justice Edition. So I want to have two disclaimers there. One, I am going to need some volunteers. I'm just going to need 4 volunteers, so I appreciate anybody that would help with that. You will get some goodie bags, so if I can bribe y'all, I am not above it. And then second is, we call it the Game of Life, but these are stories based on people's realities. And it is going to be difficult, so I just wanted to preface with that as we move forward. Once we go through the realities of what it's like to go through the criminal justice system, we're going to go into discussions and talk about the feelings that all of those issues bring up. And hopefully we can energize and use our emotions into what to do now, what actions should we be moving forward to improve the systems that we have. And then lastly, if any of y'all are interested, we can have a huge group photo to remind Arizona in particular that there is a great deal of energy to reform the systems that we're in. But I'm not going to pressure anyone that does not want to take a photo with that, because I am not photogenic and I completely understand. So let's get started, y'all. Does anybody have any questions or anything before I get into the meat? Okay. So like I was saying, I myself am Isis Gill. I'm one of the 2 current Smart Justice organizers. This is also my colleague, Yersai, here on the side. Ron mentioned earlier that I am a first-generation Mexican-American. And I preface at that because I grew up understanding the pains and tribulations that the immigrant community goes through, right? But I still believed in the idea of the American dream. It was imposed upon me at a very young age that, you know, if I put my head down and worked really hard, I could improve the lives of myself and my family members. And I really, really believed in that ideology, and it wasn't until I got a little older that I started to realize that that was more of a myth than a reality for people that had my particular accent, my particular skin, and my particular background. And really, I can share with you all the moment that I understood the difference between my ideologies and my naivety to what is really happening in the realities in our society right now. I was about 5 years old, I was eating breakfast in the cafeteria of my school's cafeteria, and one of my young friends came in bawling, just shy of literal screams, honestly. And I didn't really understand what was happening. I was 5 years old. I couldn't have context to the situation. You know, I just understood that adults don't come into the school that way, let alone children. And it wasn't until I had met her at the end of the school day that she managed to tell me that her mother had been deported. And so, yeah, right? We really didn't, I didn't know what to say. We didn't really know what to discuss. The truth of the matter of the fact was that within a moment, my friend had to decide whether she was going to stay in a country that she had known her entire life, but had no family here, or go to a country that her mother was in now, but she had no real context of culture or place. And you know, there really wasn't anything that I could say. We couldn't understand, and still to this day, I don't quite understand how it's possible that families can be separated, how we can justify this morally, or how our systems can be put together by individuals that are so far from us that they simply put laws together out of fear and pain. And when I put that now in today's perspective, when I look at what we're seeing in the news and how we're treating each other, it really kind of brings a full circle when I think of the fact that we're also doing the exact same tactics to our citizenry, right? I am thankfully and have the privilege of being an American citizen because I was born here, but there's so many other people under my particular circumstance that don't have that privilege. And when you think of it as well, there's plenty of individuals that are actually citizens of our country that have been used, that have been demonized in the same way because of the same tactics. But what's even worse is we're not allowing our own citizens to re-enter into society. And so I got involved into the ACLU, and in particular the Campaign for Smart Justice, because I feel a great sense of obligation towards families that have gone through extreme amount of trauma for no other reason than simply because of who they are. And that leads me into why we're trying to start this campaign. As I said earlier, our whole goal is to reduce the prison and jail population by at least 50% while fighting racial disparities. And I know this is an unbelievably daunting task. As some of you may know, Arizona is actually the fourth largest, has the fourth highest rate of incarceration in the nation. We are the highest rate of incarcerated Latinos. In particular, 40% of the prison population is made up by Latino men, even though our population only makes up 27% of the state's overall population. It gets a little bit more disheartening when we think of African Americans. They make up 14% of our prison population, but only 4% of the state's population. And unfortunately, because of our ideology on tough on crime and 3 strikes, you're out type of mentality, we are also incarcerating a exuberant amount of women. We are now 6th highest in incarceration rate of women in the nation as well. So what we're trying to do in terms of this campaign is reform the criminal justice system in every avenue possible. Arizona is unfortunately a massive outlier when we talk about the pains and issues that we are talking about in the system. In particular, we are a massive outlier when it comes to sentencing. We're seeing harsh and exuberant lengths of sentences simply because of the fact that we think it's in the best interest of public safety. There is no evidence that backs this up at any point other than our ego and pride at this juncture. And so what we're trying to do is bring Arizona back in line with a lot of states. We understand that this fight isn't going to be won overnight, and it does have to be incremental. So to that end, we are trying to pass this particular bill right now through our state Congress. It's House Bill 2270, or the Earned Release Credit Bill. As you can tell, this bill will allow people to earn their way, to earn more time to an earlier release date. As it stands, Arizona is one of 3 states that require anyone convicted to serve 85% of their time, regardless if it's in their best interest, right? So for example, if I was convicted of, let's say I had a small amount of marijuana on me, right? And I was convicted, I would need to serve at least 85% of my time, even if a judge would think it's in my best interest to actually go to a drug rehabilitation program. I do not have any recourse, I must spend my time in prison and then see about getting some other type of help. So what this point here is that we want Arizona to become just like every other state, that we don't need to use just overall guidelines to sentence everyone. We would like discretion to be used in every particular case, right? And we'll talk more about particularly this bill and how sentencing works as our presentation progresses. But this is also the time that I'm going to have to ask for some volunteers. So I know I saw Beth, is one hand. Can I get 3 more? 3, 4. I'll use Ronald, if he'd be so kind. Thank you so much, y'all. So we're moving on to the Game of Life Criminal Justice Edition. I should preface that there's going to be some reading, so I'm glad that you all have your glasses. So if you could take one, sorry, y'all. If you can just unring it and then put one your, I am so sorry about this. There she goes. Thank you. Awesome.
Thank you.
So if you can just take your, if you take your little story off, like the little ring off, so you can have this.
Unring it, that's what you meant.
Yeah. Ooh, I'm sorry, y'all. Oh, I'm sorry, Beth.
Maybe, yeah.
And if you'd be also kind to sit here in our lovely 4 seats. I know I have to put you all on the spot, so. But you do get goodie bags, if that makes you feel any better. It makes me feel less guilty, so I'm gonna buy that.
You presenting is the goodie bag.
Thanks, Beth. So then we'll just go through, if you guys would be also kind to
When they're doing things, we're on video, so we need to have the microphone when they talk, so it's recorded.
Thanks. Actually, can it first go to, thank you, Congressman. If you could read your description as to who you are, Beth. Let me help
if
you.
You can help me. With
Yes. And then if you could read just what's on front of your.
Hi, I'm Corey Washington. I'm an African-American male who is 21. I am a student.
Thank you. And then let's go over to actually Kathy, which, that worked out. I love how that worked out. Yes, if you'd be so kind.
Hello, my name is Kathy Jones. Race is black, gender female. I'm 22, occupation waitress, mother of 1 child, and pregnant with my 2nd child.
Thank you for that, Kathy. Susana?
I am Susana Valenzuela. I am Latina. I am a female, 25, and my occupation is a waitress.
Thank you for that. And then would you mind reading your story, Brittany?
My name is Brittany Jones. I am white, gender female. I'm age 25. My occupation is receptionist at my dad's law firm.
Thank you so much for that, y'all. Okay, so I have to break it to you all, but you've all just been arrested. And so we'll use our imagination, ladies and gentlemen, to make this area here our 4th Avenue jail. So you can all just be lovely about how that works. If you might flipping over your first cue card, and then let's just read it back from Brittany, if you'd be so kind. Ronald first. This will be a story of their charges.
Okay, arrested on July 26, 2014. Charges: possession of marijuana with intent to sell. Summary of arrest: an undercover officer poses as a customer and asks me if I could sell him some marijuana. He asked me to meet up at the local gas station. As I complete the deal, the patrol car corners me. I am immediately arrested. Officers search my car and find a pound of marijuana. I wish I had a pound.
Was the marijuana there before they searched?
Yes, in that scenario, yes.
I was arrested July 26, 2014, and my charges are possession of marijuana with intent to sell. I was hanging out with my boyfriend when he asked me to come with him to run errands. We rarely go to hang out because I'm always working to pay for my dad's medical bills. He says he has to meet up with a friend. I don't question it because I just want to spend as much time with him as possible. We drive to a gas station, I wait in the car, and he talks to his friend. Suddenly, a group of cops swarm the parking lot. They violently force me out of the car and put handcuffs on me. I'm very confused and I'm very scared. The cops search the car and they find a kilo of marijuana under my seat. Both me and my boyfriend are arrested and charged with possession of marijuana with the intent to sell.
Thank you for that, Susanna. Do you mind reading on, Kathy?
Arrested on 4/17/16. Charges are theft of a vehicle. Summary of arrest. I'm a single mother with little support from my family. 2 years ago, I was arrested and given probation for stealing diapers from Walmart. While on probation, I meet a new friend who asked me to do them a favor. The friend wants me to drive their new car from Phoenix to Mesa. He promises to give me $100 for this simple favor. I need the money to buy clothes for my new baby. I have no idea my friend's new car is stolen. I am caught and arrested for theft of a vehicle.
Thank you for that.
As I was coming back from a camping trip in Payson, I was pulled over for speeding. The officer asked me if I have any weapons or drugs. I tell him yes, I have marijuana and a small pocket knife that I used during my camping trip. He asks me to step out of the car and hand him the knife. I follow directions. As soon as I give him the knife, he handcuffs me and tells me that I am under arrest for possession of marijuana. It's May 8th of 2000. I'm charged with aggravated assault on a police officer as well.
Yeah, that's difficult to take in, right? Yeah, we can go through that, but we'll discuss that towards the end, so I don't take up too much time. But does anybody else, or does anybody here know what happens after you've been arrested? What is the next step in the process of the criminal justice system? Pre-trial hearing. Where do you know what happens at a pre-trial hearing?
The charges are read to them and what the sentence and how they plead.
Exactly. And so during the plea.
When they talk without a microphone,
Oh, I need to.
what they say.
Oh, okay.
So that we just want to make sure everything's caught on
On the video. So basically what happens is after you're arrested, you go through arraignment, where you are told what the charges are, what your bail is if you will be given bail, and then whether or not you are given an attorney, depending on whether you or not can afford one. So that's where a public defender would be appointed to you. And so to talk a little bit more about bail, there's actually this little video that gives a quick explainer on what that is. Right now, nearly 70% of people locked up in Maricopa County jails have not been convicted of a crime and are legally presumed to be innocent. Many of them are stuck behind bars because they cannot afford to pay bail. Bail is cash collateral that is supposed to ensure people return to court as their case progresses. But bail has morphed into a system of wealth-based incarceration. It essentially allows people to be punished just for being poor. People who can't pay bail could be stuck in jail for days, months, even years. They could lose their job, their home, and their children. Whatever happened to innocent until proven guilty? People who cannot afford bail have the option of going to a for-profit bail bond company who will pay their bail for them. But these companies often take advantage of people caught in a desperate situation. Usually the bail bond company will demand a non-refundable fee of 10% of your bail, plus expensive collateral like the lease to your car. Entering into a contract with a bail bondsman can be financially dangerous and drive people into debt. This unfair system hurts people of color the most. People of color are already over-policed and are arrested more than their white counterparts. Cash bail makes racial discrimination in our criminal justice system worse because many people who are jailed before trial plead guilty. They do this to get out more quickly, even if it means that they are sentenced to years of probation. And once a person has a criminal record, it is harder to get a job, find housing, and keep a family together. The cash bail system deprives Arizonans of their freedom, ruins lives, and tears families apart. Wealth-based incarceration is unacceptable, and it must end. Take a look at your character's profile. How did the bail system treat you? So does anybody have any questions about what bail is? Thank you for that. So then if you mind starting as to what your bail is set at.
The judge sets my bail at $100,000 cash only. Remember, I'm a 21-year-old student, right? He tells me that I'm also being charged with aggravated assault on a police officer for pulling a knife on the arresting officer. It's cash only bail, so I'm unable to use a bail bond company. I'm a college student, and there's no way I can afford the bail. My mom wants to help me, but she is a single mom with 3 kids and cannot afford to pay the bail either.
The judge sets my bail at $5,000. My best friend is the only person who could possibly help me pay the 10% necessary to pay a bail bondsman. My best friend collects $500, but the bondsman also wants $5,000 worth of collateral. My best friend does not have any collateral. She begs the bail bondsman to give her a loan anyway and promises she is reliable, but he says I am too much of a risk because this is my second arrest. I am stuck in jail and am forced to give birth to my second child while incarcerated.
Remember here that Kathy's first arrest was because she stole diapers. If you mind going forward.
The judge sets my bail at $20,000. I don't bother to call my dad because he's terminally sick and I know he can't pay my bail. I call my best friend who lives paycheck to paycheck and she looks into paying a bail bondsman. She discovers that she needs $20,000 worth of collateral and she doesn't have any kind of property that could be used as collateral. So I'm forced to sit in jail until trial, even though I am legally presumed to be innocent.
The judge sets my bail at $7,500. I call my boyfriend, who gave me the weed, and ask him to help me post bail. He refuses to help me. He says it was my fault for not being careful. Yeah. I'm terrified to tell my parents what happened, but my dad is a criminal lawyer, and I know he can help me. My dad immediately posts my bail and becomes my legal representation.
Yay! So, out of our 4 individuals, Brittany is the only one that actually gets to go home. So if you'd be so kind, Ronald, to sit right in front of everyone.
Go home, Brittany.
But as you can all see, what's happening in our bail system is essentially those of us that can pay for our freedom are given that reality. Those of us that cannot are stuck behind jail. And that is predominantly people of color, but realistically, we are incarcerating poverty like nobody's business. Yes?
How does cash only bail work if you give where you give the court $100,000 and they give it back if you show up, or how does that work?
So the question is, how does cash bail work? If you give the court $100,000, would you then get that $100,000 back as your appearance? Yes, that is 100% how it would happen. But it would have to be cash only. So if you could somehow get $100,000, then you would be fine, right?
How do you even get $100,000 cash? Like, you can't withdraw more than $2,000 from your bank at one time.
I mean, yeah, because you can't. You'd have to have some really good friends that suddenly are being able to loan you some physical cash like that, right? I mean,
involved in the business that you were arrested for not being in.
I'm gonna put that one out there, but I love you how you're thinking, Beth. Yes.
Do you have statistics on releases of unrecognizance and pretrial services?
So the question is, do we have statistics on release on overcognizance, or, oh, I'm sorry, do you mind repeating that?
Pretrial services.
Pretrial services. We are actually trying to get that now. We have reached out to every county in Arizona, and as you can tell, they're not necessarily the most expedient with that information. We actually just got the information from Maricopa County, which is our largest county in Arizona, and we're sifting through. We're literally trying to do the analysis right now when we have an independent contractor with us that's helping us. So I don't have the specific statistics. I can give you generalities. Like, for example, I can tell you that 70% of the people that go through 4th Avenue Jail, so our Maricopa's system, they are detained pre-trial because of the fact that they can't afford bail. But I can't give you any bigger statistics right now in terms of even our bail bondsman companies and industries, because unfortunately they are making an exuberant amount of money off of our system, right? It's turned into a different version of title loans or payday loans.
Senator Bernie Sanders is working hot and heavy on this issue.
So Senator Bernie Sanders is working on this, if anyone. Thankfully, a lot of people are really trying to reform our bail system. California actually recently ended the bail system as a whole, as a state. And that's slightly interesting as well, because the ACLU of California was first 100% on board with that. But as time progressed and it actually got made on the books that it's no longer being used as a system, the ACLU of California actually removed their support. And the thought process behind this is there is no easy answer to the issues that we have in our system, right? So what's happening in California is they no longer are making you pay cash collateral. So you can't basically incarcerate poor people. But what's happening is they're using an algorithm that isn't transparent. So we don't necessarily know what's happening when a computer generates a number and says, hey, you're more likely to reoffend, and you're not. So we can't even tell the distinction. But we do know some things, like one of the things that are used in the system is how many times an individual has moved. And by default, people of color tend to move more than our white counterparts, right? We tend to be more renters rather than homeowners. But if we just use that in itself as one of the pieces as to whether or not someone should be in jail, it gets very, very discriminating very quickly, right? And especially when we think about it that we don't know of all the things that are going into that algorithm, which makes it a little bit more complicated. So that's some of the issues that we're working on bail. Yes?
It's my understanding that for about 3 years, Chief Justice Scott Bales and the Arizona Supreme Court have been addressing this issue. I'm not really familiar right now how far they've gotten, but the focus for judges, and they can be ordered by the Supreme Court to do this, the focus has to be on danger to the community, and your ability to pay. So I think this might need a little updating for Arizona.
I'm sorry, Pam, I'm not going to be able to repeat everything you just said. It's slightly true. I would say yes, that there is people, in particular the Supreme Court, that is trying to give discretion, but as it is right now, it's actually not allowed in discretion for each county. So essentially, each county even works their bail system differently. So while we're trying to even make it a consistent system that actually says, hey, at each case you're going to use your own discretion, it's not actually being used in that way. So there isn't really any accountability to what you're saying. But ideally, yes, that's what's on the books. Yes?
I also think that a lot of this could be ameliorated by the repeal of all these victimless crime laws that people are being thrown in prison for.
For sure, I agree. We are criminalizing a lot of things that I don't think we should. For example, homelessness, a lot of mental illness. There's a lot, like honestly, we're criminalizing individuals that can't pay fines and fees, like tickets. That has accumulated, and as far as I know, a debtor's prison is illegal. But unfortunately, I can assure you that a good chunk of our prison population or our jail population is that. Yes, in the back. What you're saying is 100% correct, and it is done intentional. So the point that she was making is what we're seeing is there is a law in the books that if you can't pay your fines and fees or tickets, then your driver's license will get repealed. So essentially what's happening is if you can't drive, then how are you going to make it to court, right? Or ideally you would have some type of way to make it there through like bus fare or Lyft or things of that sort. But especially when we find people in these circumstances, they tend to be really poor or not have access to these types of resources. So what you're saying is 100% true. We've set up systems to more or less entrap people in the system. So beyond that, so does anyone else know what happens after you have had your bail? Does anybody know what's on the next thing in the process? Completely understandable. So the next thing here is you actually would meet your prosecutor and find out what basically is on the table. So to go into a little bit more depth about what is a prosecutor, here's another little info video.
Pop quiz. Who is the most powerful and influential person in the criminal justice system? It's not a judge. It's your local elected prosecutor. Here's the secret about the American criminal justice system. About 97% of cases are resolved by plea bargain. The judge has almost no role in the plea bargaining process. It's the prosecutor who decides whether you're going to go to prison and for how long. Their daily decisions with regard to who to charge, how to charge them, and what prison sentence to seek has been one of the primary drivers of incarceration. So let's go back in time. Say it's 1980, you're caught for shoplifting, you're taken to court. You might be charged with a misdemeanor offense and get some community service. In 2017, the same charge might result in a felony and years in prison. How did we get here? Well, for years, prosecutors have acted with almost unchecked power. They're almost never hauled into the courtroom to answer for unaccountable practices. And the legislatures have handed prosecutors more and more power through harsh sentencing regimes, forcing people to accept plea bargains. Here's something that a lot of people don't know about district attorneys. Almost all of them are elected politicians. Prosecutors have stood in the way of criminal justice reform for decades. It's going to take a major effort to shift that tide. But guess what? We're already starting to win. In 2016, we saw a new wave of prosecutors elected to office. Prosecutors who ran on an agenda of reducing incarceration and addressing racial disparities. In cities with district attorneys who support smart justice, they emphasize rehabilitation and treatment over severe punishment. They use scarce taxpayer dollars wisely to support approaches that are more humane and more effective than incarceration. During your next district attorney election, who are you going to choose?
So then, yes, question.
Yeah, this is great stuff. A friend of mine I know who has a national talk show, he puts out the idea that it's a radical thought, but if we made plea bargain illegal, who does plea bargaining benefit? Actually guilty defendants and lazy prosecutors. Okay, why does the general public want to support that? Okay, if the government has limited resources, they would only be able to charge people if they actually had a case against. Okay, they wouldn't be able to stack charges against people and make people plead guilty to things they didn't do.
So I'm going to try my best to make a summary of that. So basically, why is it that we have a plea system as a whole? Who does it really benefit, and who is it really to the advantage of at the end goal? Essentially, it seems like that would be counterintuitive, right? And how actually this works is our system was actually designed to have an exuberant high rate of plea deals. We would ideally want the majority of people that come under our criminal justice system to actually take a plea deal. And under an ideal world where laws and prosecutors and judges were using discretion and being civil in terms of their sentencing, this actually wouldn't be a problem. Because if we think about it in terms of otherwise taking everyone to fair trial, we have a judicial right for a speedy and fair trial. But unfortunately, it is not happening right now. It takes months, if not years, for you to actually complete a trial if you were to go that route. So the mindset there is that we don't want to clog up our system. So if we find someone that's a low-level, nonviolent, no real risk to society, they should just be allowed to take some type of rehabilitation program or some type of training. And it used to actually be that way, but we've gotten away from that since the 1980s, actually earlier from the 1970s or so when we started closing a lot of our mental institutions.
I was going to say that maybe not part of the reason, but somebody with a mental illness who's got no place to go, we don't have beds. We don't have hospital beds. We just don't. And so, like a prison, you're indoors,
and you're getting food. And I'm not saying it's good, but if we're going to talk about not incarcerating people for mental health issues, we've got to have a place for them to go, which we also don't have. I'm also really curious to find out how much taxpayer money is spent housing people in jail while they are still presumed innocent, and how much money our state could save.
So the question there, thank you so much for sharing, Beth, was, I see you in the back and I apologize, I'm not forgetting you. So in context of time and saving us, I'll take your comment, and then going forward, if we could just hold our questions until the discussion portion. Yes, as well, that would be nice, so I don't have to keep making summaries of it. I apologize about that. But to Beth's point, we don't have specific figures on the jail population, unfortunately, until we have a further analysis. But I can tell you that the state uses more than 1/10 of our budget. We spend $1.1 billion on the prison complex every year. But yes, in the back, if you'd be so kind.
So I'm curious on the relationship with the harsher sentences. Is that also related to the formation and proliferation of private prisons?
So is harsher sentencing related to the privatization of prisons? Unequivocally, yes. But it's not just the privatization of prisons. It started long before building of prisons. It's actually started with privatization of services. Then we realized you could make a boatload of money on that. And so we're like, okay, why don't we go further into it? Let's build prisons. And oh no, we have actual contracts on top of that. And the even scarier part of this, on top of it, is now Department of Corrections is making money off of individuals that are coming out of prison and have ankle monitors. They are actually the ones making the ankle monitors. They are the ones you would be paying for surveillance, and those are the ones that you have no other choice but to go and report to. So these are fines and fees that you need to pay, otherwise you will find yourself back in prison. I'm sorry, Debbie. We'll start back in the discussion part. Oh, but we'll start back.
Real quick comment on that.
Yeah, of course, Debbie. What's your comment?
With my experience in 1978 when I started, Earl Wilcox was a legislator there who actually helped with the issues that were being done outside of the policies or law. Eventually, as a friend, he wasn't able to, he turned out. What he said to me is that private prisons were where the money is, and that's where the legislature was directed. They started basically creating, they started with commissary. They started with, and it just went from there. So they have to pay for their own clothes, which is the orange jumpsuits. When they get out, they basically give it back to DOC. They turn around and resell it. So it is a for-profit, and Arizona is probably one of the peak when it started. So.
If anybody couldn't hear Debbie's comments in the back, she was making some very key points. That it started with basically individuals that are incarcerated had to pay for food and clothing. I don't know if any of you are aware, but women had a limited resource of tampons every month. They pay for electricity. They pay for, if they have an outside job within the prison, they pay for housing and board and things of that sort.
$4 for a doctor visit.
So yeah, and you have to pay for a leave, toilet paper. It gets on and on as to how much money the state, in particular the systems, are making on top of everyone. And I apologize, I see you, but I'm just going to hold on to that. So then if you mind reading what Corey's situation with his prosecutor is.
The prosecutor tells me that if I plead guilty, I'll only be charged for the aggravated assault. And I will spend 50% less time in prison. My public defender tells me that half the time will be better than a full sentence, and that if I go to trial, the jury will probably be tough on me since the case involves a law enforcement officer. I trust my public defender and accept the plea deal.
Thank you for that. I'm going to steal this chair here. If you would be so kind, Corey, to come sit in Florence, prison for just gentlemen. If you mind coming.
The prosecutor demands that I give up the name of my friend who asked me to drive the stolen vehicle. I don't want to tell him, but my public defender says it's likely the prosecutor will lower my charge if I comply. The prosecutor promises I will serve no more jail time if I comply. I have already been in jail for 2 months and am desperate to hold my newborn baby again. I take the deal.
Thank you for that, Kathy. So That is brutal, and I appreciate the response in the room. But as well, Kathy is no longer in jail. So if you'd be so kind to come sit out here with Brittany. Susanna?
During the negotiations with the prosecutor, he asked me questions about where I was getting my marijuana supply. I tell him that I don't use or sell marijuana, but he doesn't believe me. I'm starting to think that my public defender doesn't believe me either, because she is not doing a very good job of defending me. The prosecutor says my boyfriend already confessed everything, and if I don't plead guilty, he will add another charge. I just want to speed up the process because I'm getting increasingly worried that the longer that I spend in jail, the less time I will get to spend with my terminally ill father. I agreed to the plea deal.
Thank you for that, Susanna. If you'd be so kind to go over to Perryville, which is our lovely prison for women in the state. Brittany?
Okay, my attorney slash dad convinced the prosecutor that he would be able to prove in court that I was coerced by my emotionally abusive boyfriend to sell the marijuana. The prosecutor was worried about wasting time on a case that she was likely to lose given the strong defense my dad could bring to the table. She agrees to dismiss the charges as long as I spend 6 months in a drug treatment and rehabilitation program.
So the system works in some ways, right? So after you have met the prosecutor and decided to go, to plead guilty or, take a plea deal or, decide to go to trial, you would then go to a judge to actually have it all spelled out before the court for record. So to find out a little bit about what it's like to get sentenced, here's another lovely explainer video. After a person is found guilty at trial, or they accept a plea bargain, the next step is sentencing. Typically, the judge presiding over a case determines the sentence. A sentence can include a fine, imprisonment, probation, community service, or drug treatment. In Arizona, however, many crimes are tied to a mandatory minimum sentence, a predetermined amount of time that the convicted person must spend in prison. These sentences have been set by the state legislature and do not take into account the particular circumstances of a case. For example, if a person is suffering from a drug addiction and is convicted on drug charges, they could be required to serve years in prison, even if a judge thinks they would be better off in a drug treatment program. Another problem with sentencing in Arizona is the state's truth in sentencing laws, which require all people convicted of a crime to serve at least 85% of their sentence. In other states, people are often let out of prison early because they have taken part in education and rehabilitation programs. But in Arizona, our harsh truth in sentencing laws eliminate the incentive to take part in these programs, leading more people to reoffend. In many cases, Arizona keeps people behind bars long after it's safe for them to return home. Take a look at your story profile. How long were you sentenced? Was it just? So in the interest of saving time, so that we'll have discussions, I'm just going to run through this, and then we'll have discussions after. Do you mind reading Brittany's sentencing?
Okay. I spent 6 months in a drug treatment and rehabilitation program. I never used marijuana. I only sold it, so the drug treatment portion of the program is useless to me. However, the counseling I received in the program helps me to see the flaws in my relationship that were taking a serious toll on my mental health.
So some things happen, right? If you'd mind reading Kathy's.
I am sentenced to probation. I am released from jail but cannot immediately be reunited with my baby. My kids have been taken into state custody. I have to find an attorney and fight to get her back.
All too common, unfortunately. Do you mind reading Corey's?
I'm sentenced to 10 years in prison for aggravated assault on a police officer.
The judge finds me guilty and gives me 3 years in the state prison.
Thank you. So that's really hard to swallow, right? We're seeing some huge disparities in how the system works for who it does and who it doesn't, right? So lastly, in my opinion, one of the most jarring and painful aspects of this is actually reentry. So let's use all our imagination. We have gone into the future, right? Woo! Everybody has completed their time, and now all of us are going to re-enter society, for those of us that haven't already, right? So let's start with Corey's. Or actually, let's go through this explainer video to actually understand what the majority of people have to go through to re-enter society.
Cobb, CL3691, get your shit. You're out of here. That's the last thing that I remember hearing upon leaving prison. After serving 6.5 years in Pennsylvania state prisons, I was finally becoming a returning citizen. Today, 18 years removed from my release from prison, I have stable employment, I have stable housing, I provide for my family, but the threat of losing it all is very real and something that I have to encounter every single day. Let me take you on a brief tour of what it's like to return home from jail or prison. First, you need to find suitable housing. Landlords have the legal right to discriminate against people who have arrested convictions. Many times, a condition of parole and probation is that you actually have suitable housing. Because of the policies that are in place, it automatically puts people in a position where they violated their probation and parole, therefore driving them back into jails and prisons. Now you need to find a way to pay for housing, which sends you into the job force. So what happens is that you apply for positions and you may have to answer the question, have you ever been convicted of a felony? If so, explain. Truth of the matter is that many employers never provide you with the opportunity to explain. In fact, only about 12.5% of employers say that they'll even accept applications from formerly incarcerated people. But you're fortunate enough to get an interview and the interview goes well. Well, the employer has to run the criminal background check. So what happens when some employers see a background check, they instantaneously disqualify that individual for employment. I've been hired and fired over 24 times. I began working and then my criminal record comes back and an employer terminates my employment. As many as 75% of people released from jails and prisons find themselves unemployed a year after their release. You realize that these policies need to be changed and you want to do something about it. Voting is the answer. If you're convicted of a felony in America, depending on which state you live in, you may or may not have the ability to vote. Today in America, more than 6.1 million people are unable to vote because of their felony conviction. Are we living in a democracy? Have we provided people with the second chance that they've earned by serving their time? Today, an estimated 70 to 100 million Americans are living with criminal records. We can't afford to have that many people locked out of society.
So I know that's a lot to take. So let's go through what our scenarios have to deal with for their reentry.
My 10-year sentence ends in 2015. There have been enormous technological advancements since I first went into prison in 2000. I do not
The
know-
math is off on that. I completely understand. But keep
Oh,
going.
okay,
No.
I thought there was going to be an explanation of how they can make you serve 15 years. Like it just gets better and better. Damn. Okay. I don't know what a smartphone is. I don't know how to work one. I'm intimidated by the internet. I want to enroll in a community college, but stopped pursuing the idea when I realized most of the work has to be done online. I start looking for a job, but many places only accept online applications, so I give up hope. A friend from prison who was released before me is a drug dealer and tells me I could start selling drugs with him in order to sustain myself financially. I figure it's worth the risk because I have no other way to pay my bills. I'm arrested again, just 3 years after my release, when an officer finds cocaine in my car. I am found guilty of intent to distribute and sentenced to several more years in prison.
Thank you for that. Do you mind reading Susanna's reentry story?
While in prison, my friend tells me that she knows someone on the outside who could supply an illegal medication to my dad to help him deal with the pain of his illness. I feel guilty for abandoning my dad during a time when he needed me most, so I figure at least I can do is help him overcome the pain. Through the outside third party, I arrange deals to get my dad the medication. The prison guard soon finds out, and I am indicted on a related charge. I accept the plea deal and I get an additional 7 years in prison. I only get to see my dad 3 more times during supervised, time-limited visits at the prison before he finally passes away.
Thank you for that. So unfortunately, Susanna and Corey find themselves back in prison by the end of our scenario, right?
I lost my job while I was in jail because I no called, no showed for 2 days in a row. I also lost my apartment. I am now struggling to find work and housing because of my conviction. I am living in a motel, which makes it more difficult to prove to the state that I can provide stable housing for my kids. I am surviving off odd jobs and hope to one day be able to see my kids again.
So Kathy is struggling, but thankfully is still out. And how did Brittany end up? Well,
I have no problem reintegrating into society. I have no charges on my criminal record, so I have no barriers when it comes to employment and housing. I am soon married and now spend my time caring for my 2 kids.
thank you for that. And so that is the totality of our Game of Life Criminal Justice Edition. So let's put our hands together and thank everybody for participating.
Okay, if you have, once Isis is finishing up, raise your hand, and I'm going to bring the microphone to you so that we can make sure to hear everybody on the video, okay? So wait for me to get to you.
Pam, if you'd be so kind, I help someone and hold, and the lady in the back.
Kyle?
So yeah, we're just going into the discussion part now. So just thoughts, feelings. How's everyone digressing with that?
Who is it?
Digesting it?
Oh, okay. Over here.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, this goes back to your comments about a speedy trial. Years ago, the American Friends Service Committee, which is the service branch of the Quakers, did a study on deterrence. And by far the most significant deterrent, and I don't remember how many years ago this was, I'm ancient, was a speedy trial. No other. Long sentencing, no bail, death penalty. Did not even come close.
I'm glad you bring that up because it talks about the subtle complexities of this, right? When we talk about trial, we understand the concept of that you are meant to have a jury of your peers. Now, that may really work for a large chunk of our demographic if you are more white and affluent, but if you're a person of color, it is far and few between that you would actually find a jury of your peers. So there's a huge deterrent in that aspect in terms of, do you really feel like you are getting reasonable justice or even reasonable discretion? So a lot of people are 100% actually made that as a deterrent because of fear and reality of how our system works. There's a little bit more that we can go into that, but those are the 2 things that are really overwhelming in our trial.
Okay. First, thank you for the presentation. It's a really good overview of the state of how things currently are. I see underlying suggestion throughout that the judges should have a little bit more leniency in making these decisions themselves. But along the same lines as you said, California pulled out of the support because of this algorithm that they're using that's not transparent.
Mm-hmm.
The individual judges are essentially untransparent algorithms of their own with their own biases that influence us the same. So I was wondering, is there suggested guidelines or other law proposals for a replacement of this other than just what the judge feels like doing?
That's a very good question. So as it works right now, basically, as you stand before a judge, right, you have your prosecutor on your side and whether or not you have attorney present, essentially. So the prosecutor would tell the judge what they believe is in the state's best interest to follow. And so then the judge uses their own discretion to say yes. Well, I mean, not really in our system right now, but ideally would say, okay, that seems a little too harsh for me, or actually I feel like X, Y, and Z makes them more of a flight risk, so I'm going to put more bail or what have you. We don't have anything technically on the books for that. What we would love to happen is that our judges to actually start advocating for that as well. And I'm not going to say who, but we have some talks about of actually having that happen. There isn't anything like that on the books, and it is very difficult, right? Because you really write into discretion. What we're trying to do with that is write in transparency. So whatever your mindset or rationale as to setting a bail or whatever you're convicting that individual, we would like that just to be as transparent and on the books and public record. That's basically what we're trying to do with that as a first step.
Hello. What's trending now, like in the news, is the possibility of there being such a thing as a progressive, as being a progressive prosecutor. You know, with the discussions about Kamala Harris and her, you know, she was the DA. I mean, she was the AG for the state of California. And so all of her work life has been as a prosecutor, and from that, so that people are having discussions about, but is there a possibility of a progressive prosecutor? And one of the places that they look to see if this is possible is in Ferguson, Missouri. As you know, when Michael Brown was killed and all of that, and there was a change in the electoral arena in Ferguson, and one of which led to the election of a person who claims, and others say he is a progressive, even though he is, you know, from the prosecutorial side.
Yeah, from the COG.
So I'm just wondering, is the ACLU, are there stats or anything that we can, you know, because we're in the election season already, right? And so is this one area that we need to get some stats on?
So yes, I appreciate you bringing that up. Does anybody actually know the name of Maricopa's prosecutor? Bill Montgomery. Does anybody know Yavapai's prosecutor?
Sheila Polk.
Does anybody know Pinal's? Barbara Lawal. So I appreciate that. I bring those three up in particular because they are our biggest outliers when it comes to, I would say, conservative prosecutors. They're the ones that are stacking charges on people at exuberant rates, and in rural counties are giving people sentences trying to basically compete. It's more or less like for lack of a better word, it's like a prison thon as to who can win this. And so basically what is happening is our communities are recognizing that this is not appropriate. There is actually some prosecutors in the system that have well intentions and are trying to do well, but if you have your head boss essentially telling you everything that you're trying to do, I'm not going to have, it's not going to go anywhere, right? You're not going to be able to change the system or the culture of what's going on. So this is an odd situation for the ACLU because we are nonpartisan. We don't support any particular candidate, but there is local organizations that I can talk to you a little bit later that are trying to cultivate more progressive prosecutors to change what we have here.
So your presentation describes both racial disparities that result from our criminal justice system. It also describes how our criminal justice system disproportionately impacts the poor, and how it has a much stronger negative impact on someone who's poor compared to someone who's rich. My question is, are the racial disparities that exist in our criminal justice system exclusively the product of the disparity between how our criminal justice system impacts the rich versus the poor, or are there other reasons that also create these racial disparities?
That's an interesting question. I don't think I've ever really thought about that. So essentially the number one connecting thing is if you have money, regardless of whether you're black, white, brown, yellow, red, whatever, purple, whatever color we come up with, you essentially have some type of recourse in our system. But if you are poor, regardless of whatever color you are, red, white, blue, purple, you are going to find yourself in the same particular circumstances that everyone else does. So there isn't, I mean, obviously we live in America, right? Racism is ingratiated in every aspect that we live in. We have to deal with the fact that we haven't really come to terms with our diversity and what that means and what it really means to be in community with one another with people that are different. So I wouldn't say there is anything else beyond the really almighty dollar. America is very much in love with what that means, with what our capitalistic buildings are, and where our power and position is. So that's really one of our biggest motivators, and we are leading the world in incarceration because of that.
Hi. I kind of have a unique perspective because in 2002 to 2004, I was a classification counselor in the Madison Street Jail before the 4th Avenue was built. So I determined minimum, medium, or maximum security for the people who were not released on their own recognizance or supervised by pretrial services, the people who got a bond. In 2002, that was 99 to 2001. In 2002 to 2004, I was a criminal courtroom clerk. So I did the min entries. And then in 2004 to 2006, I was a probation officer with the best intentions for rehabilitation. And you get all kinds of people. You get the criminal justice, like punishment people, and then you get people like myself who tried for rehabilitation. And then in 2011, I was a victim of a random home invasion by a career criminal Aryan Brotherhood member who had done 19 years in prison and is now doing 30 years in prison for my crime. So I have very conflicting, and I mean, this is such a complex issue that it's kind of hard to sum up I can't even sum up my beliefs here. But what I can say is that there are sentencing guidelines like a class 4 felony for forgery or stealing someone's identity. The presumptive is 2.5 years. But there's also the discretion of judges for mitigated sentences for below the presumptive and aggravated sentences. So they do take some of the circumstances into account. And also, most people, I don't have statistics, most people get probation. And having, to begin with, especially first-time offenders. So with probation, you try to help these people, right? And you send them to drug treatment, and a lot of people don't want help, or they're in the stage of addiction where they're not ready for that help. And there are so many different, there are a lot of, sure, sorry, I don't mean to go on, but with drugs are additional crimes. There's burglary, there's forgery, there's identity theft. Some of these people are really bad people. So, I'm not about mass incarceration, but I just think that there's so much more to this issue than we can discuss in an hour.
I appreciate that, y'all. I think I'm going to cut our questions at that point. I apologize. So that we can just talk about ways to get active.
Yeah. Wrap up. Okay.
And then if you'd
we'll
be okay
get
with
to
that.
questions afterward. Okay.
Yeah, I apologize. And then I'll be here at lunch, so you can pick my ear all that you'd like. But yes, there is so much more subtlety and nuances to all of this. At the end of the day, none of us are advocating that there be no criminal justice system. There are individuals that unfortunately cause crime and harm to other people in our community, right? That's a reality. But what we're hoping for is some just civility in it, some humanity in it, to have more discretion, to be more of the issues that are causing mass incarceration, right? When we talk about mass incarceration overall, it's more of the symptoms. We don't talk about financial instability. We don't talk about the fact that we don't have mental institutions anymore. We don't talk about the fact that we have no real resources for people that are homeless. We don't talk about the fact that we have gone out of our way to cause an opioid crisis and have absolutely no form to fix it. So those are the things that we want to talk about in terms of ingratiating ourselves and developing a system that really makes us support each other. I'll come back to you, Debbie. But as well, so I know everyone is feeling a lot of things right now. I know this presentation can be really overwhelming. So what I'd like to do now is kind of call to an action, so hopefully we can take our emotions and our frustrations and kind of move forward as to what we can do. So what we're asking for here in terms of the ACLU, like I was saying, we're really trying to push this particular bill, that's House Bill 2270, which will bring discretion into how our sentencing works a little bit more than what it was before. So I would love to pass around a clipboard. Basically, if at all possible, I would love people to sign up to show support for committee hearings. So I can't really give you the time as to when the committees will happen right now. It's based on when the bill processes. But I can give you like a 24 to 48 hour advance notice. So don't feel like it's a contract. If you sign up, you have to show up. But if you know you have availability and you more or less have a little bit more wiggle room, I would love it if you would sign up, and then we would basically teach you how to speak to the legislature and things like that, so you don't have to be overwhelmed or a little bit frightened of talking to our actual senators and House representatives. So that's one option. Oh, go ahead, Pam.
Sorry, I'm going to put these all on these tables up by Elizabeth and Sandy up front for people to come and sign them.
This one here is also, we're asking that you can contact your representatives at actionaclu.org, send message. You basically just type in your zip code, and then it'll populate what your representative is, and then you just say, you actually put in your name, and then you shoot a generated email that we have as to why we believe the reduction of or earned release could actually be something that's necessary for people. So that is also something that if you are interested in, I would really appreciate everyone's support. Yes?
Would that be retroactive, like for people that are already incarcerated? Or would it be for people that...
Yes. So if we could get this bill to pass, it would affect about 17,000 individuals in our criminal justice system in Arizona. Overall, we have a little bit over 42,000 people right now in our prison system. It has grown by at least by a little bit over nine times what our population was in 2000. So it's crazy. We are going out of our way to increase this. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know which committee this is going to go through?
It's going to go through the House Judiciary Committee. Is where it is right now.
Who's on the committee?
There's a couple of people on it. I can't think. I'm thinking of the Senate. Yeah, but I have a list of it, so I can give that to y'all. And then lastly here. Oh, I'm sorry. You let me know when you're ready. I know I had a QR code earlier, and then I realized that I am not tech savvy, so I.
Yeah, there's a
Yes.
sign-up sheet up there, and they will contact.
Yeah. There.
What I want to use as an observation through me being a native, and I've born and raised here, and I've been involved since 1978. What I've watched is that the Arizona State Mental Hospital be turned into the Alhambra Reentry into the prison system, and what it does is it just feeds. So there is no mental health. And then what happens, what we've got now is we've got generations of mix of mental health, addiction, abuse, and everything else that kind of all falls into it, and then we are creating hate factories, and it just continues to go on. And so what it does is it spills into our society, onto our streets, and this is what happens. But this is basically as a result of us politicizing, and basically criminalizing all of this, and it has just blown up.
I agree. I mean, to Debbie's point, I believe this is a human issue. I don't believe it's a political issue. This is an issue that our communities and our neighborhoods have to take accountable for. Regardless of what someone has or has not done, we're essentially judging someone by the worst moment of their lives. And I really don't believe that's how we should start talking to each other, because no one, I believe, would come out well in that type of conversation. And then lastly here, there is also this option that we would love for you all to become digital champions. So anyone that is actually super savvy with social media, you can actually get a frame for us that we have, People Not Prisons. So if you have Facebook, you can go on to your profile, go to your photo and actually adjust your frame. Look for the ACLU of Arizona, and then this frame will come up so you can support us as well. And then lastly here, these are all the ways that you can follow us on social media as well. So here's us at Twitter, here's us at Facebook, and here's us on Instagram. I will admit, I have no Instagram. It terrifies me to nobody's end. But yeah, that basically is my time. I know, hopefully, my apologies, y'all. I thought I was doing well, but I will leave it to Ron.
Yes, thank you very much, Isis, for the presentation. Wow.
All right, that's the end of our presentation today. Thank you so much for coming out and joining us for this presentation. It was very fine. If you could give one more round of applause to ISIS. Also, Angel is standing here in the orange shirt here. If you'd like to talk about his project for going to Puerto Rico and helping rebuilding homes, we'd greatly appreciate your help with that as well. Thank you, everybody. There's plenty of food in the back if you'd like